Here's the thing about Stavros Halkias. He never sat down, looked into a camera for 3 hours, and delivered a dissertation on why Joe Rogan's comedy scene has turned into a lifestyle cult for guys who own elk jerky subscriptions. He didn't have to. He just kept writing good jokes. He kept clowning himself into oblivion.
Gotta go to the Maldives. Interesting. Okay. You don't seem like a Maldives guy. Cape Cod seems a little much for you, even. You know what I mean? I'd be like more of a Hampton Beach type of fellow. Hey, I played there last summer. I'm not better than this guy.
He kept getting on stage and telling stories about being a guy, a sweaty, lovable, chronically unlucky guy, and then letting you laugh with him rather than sitting there while he explains how the world works. And somehow, that alone, just doing comedy, turned into one of the most quietly devastating critiques of the Rogan orbit you'll ever see.
You're a girlfriend guy?
I never had a situation where I was like going into a dangerous situation.
Never, huh? Never.
No.
You probably were getting. You were a cute kid. You were probably
pretty
getting
cute. I was boy friendly.
Oh, dude.
Boy handsome, boy pretty.
Little Freudian slip. Boy friendly.
Boy friendly. It's all that Papua New Guinea talk.
So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to break down why Stavros Halkias has become the comedian people point to when they say that's what comedy is supposed to look like. We're going to look at how Joe Rogan's scene, and I don't just mean Rogan, I mean the whole constellation of pods and clubs and bro comics orbiting him, quietly turned into something that functions less like a comedy ecosystem and more like a religion with better lighting.
Pretend West Papa, whatever the
that
country.
Elon satellite right above him. They can get Starlink.
Yeah, let's do that. Beam in, see Wolf Blitzer being like, all right, they're a country now. You know what I mean? That guy's free.
And we're going to ask a very simple question. When one comedian makes you laugh until you cry, and the other one makes you think he might be about to sell you supplements, which one is actually a comedian? Let's go. Let me give you the most concise summary I can of Joe Rogan's podcast persona. Joe Rogan is a guy who is very, very impressed by ideas, especially ideas he just heard 10 minutes ago. He will listen to a guest explain something, and then immediately have the facial expression of a man who has just learned that oxygen exists. Mouth slightly open, eyes wide, a slow, reverent nod. Whoa, I never thought about it like that. And that would be fine.
Of us have an awesome black midget that we bring on. Dude,
you couldn't
yeah.
anymore.
Beetlejuice rocks.
Imagine if he bailed on his contract and said, you know what, I got $1 billion in the bank.
Yeah.
I'm firing all the executives. I'm buying a warehouse.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just build a wild-ass studio in there and just do podcasts.
That's a great podcast instinct, actually. Genuine curiosity is compelling. The problem is that the audience started doing it too. They started treating Rogan's sense of wonder as wisdom.
And if you want to never make fun of marginalized groups or never make fun of protected classes or never make fun of anybody that's downtrodden or disassociated or well, you can't do that. You can't. That's not stand-up comedy.
His musings became talking points. His interviews became canonical texts. And somewhere along the way, the comedy show became a philosophy seminar where the jokes are mostly about how there are too many genders these days.
Yeah. Ari's a sickly old man. That's elder abuse to do that to Ari.
Ari seems like he's 50 years older than me, and he's younger than me by quite a bit.
Stavros Halkias operates in a completely different universe. There are entire online discussions, threads, videos, comment sections where people describe Stavros as the anti-Rogan.
Funny to hear the clips from when they were on terrestrial radio, and they're like, easy, Patrice, and they're like, oh wait, he can't say, he can't say
anything.
Yeah. But it's fascinating. But yeah, I guess that's what the radio guys were thinking, you know. But I agree with you. You should try and understand what's going on, not like feel threatened.
And they don't mean that as an insult to either guy necessarily. They mean it as an observation. These two people have completely different ideas about what a comedian is supposed to be. Rogan's sphere, at its worst, treats the comedian as a kind of secular prophet.
You know, in the comedy world, we say we're the last line of defense because this is where the woke meets the wall. The woke meets the wall with stand-up comedy. You can't have woke comedy. It sucks. It's impossible.
When so much of stand-up comedy is the like negative, for whatever reason, view on trans people, it's like, for a while, like the last special, I was like, I can't have a trans joke.
Yeah,
It's hack to even have one, right?
A guy whose willingness to go there and say the quiet part loud makes him brave, dangerous, essential.
His strategy is to keep his body healthy so he
That
can
makes
drink.
sense. Respect. Respect, man.
I mean, obviously it's working.
Yeah.
How do you not love the guy?
A comedian who sees through the matrix and is courageous enough to tell you what's really going on. Stavros' version of a comedian is a guy who has funny stories about himself.
Anybody here plumping up these days? Yeah? What are you doing, buddy? What are you plumping up on?
I just weighed myself the other day, 315.
315. How tall are you?
6'3".
6'3". All right, we got a right guard in the house.
And wants to make a room full of strangers laugh. That's it. That's the whole philosophy. And when you put those two self-images next to each other, I am a truth teller who uses comedy to wake people up, versus I am a clown and clowning is the job, one of them sounds like the beginning of a cult pamphlet, and the other one sounds like someone who actually likes their job. Now here's the part that really matters. Stavros has been pretty clear in various interviews and appearances that he doesn't want to be anyone's answer to anything. He doesn't want to be the left's version of Joe Rogan. He doesn't want to be a political savior. He doesn't want fans who follow him because they've adopted his worldview. He wants fans who come to his shows because he made them spit out their drink on a Tuesday night. And that right there is a quiet but total rejection of the Rogan model.
They made him sound like a comedian.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of them, man. And some of them were headliners. It was crazy. It was crazy. It was like the whole world wanted comedy.
Right.
And then it kind of died off.
Because the Rogan model requires you to want to be a guru. It requires you to believe that your perspective on culture, society, health, politics, and the fundamental nature of reality is interesting enough to broadcast for 3 hours at a time. Stavros, by contrast, seems genuinely allergic to that idea, and his success, sold-out theaters, millions of listeners, rabid fan loyalty, proves you can build an audience without once pretending to be a philosopher king. The funniest part? A lot of Rogan's circle would probably consider themselves funnier than Stavros. And that's the joke. Let's talk about material. Because here's where the contrast gets really sharp. And here's where Stavros' success becomes something more than just, he's funny. It becomes an argument. Stavros Halkias' stand-up is at its core about himself, about his body, about his dating life, about sex and humiliation, and the specific chaos of being a human person in close contact with other human people.
I think the art form is be funny.
Yes, of course.
Full stop. There is no other element to it. There is nothing else. And that's why I say it's low, because it's like, it is not complicated. It is like somebody who is mentally disabled can be an incredible stand-up comic.
Yeah.
No shots at them, right? You know what I mean? Like,
And I think there's a separation of being funny doesn't mean you're anything other than that.
Yeah.
Like people think, oh, you're funny, you must be wise.
exactly. Which, by the way, I love that anyone can do it. That's what I like. That's part of what I like about it. It's that, like, you know, because you get people who are very over-intellectual and are really smart people that cannot do stand-up comedy, right? And then you get people who couldn't do anything else, and they're savants at comedy, right?
Yeah.
And I love that about it, and I think it makes it very interesting, and I love that you can't.
About being a guy who maybe isn't handling things perfectly, who maybe has made some choices you wouldn't recommend, who is absolutely going to tell you about it with the energy of someone who has fully accepted his own ridiculousness. He's not hiding behind cleverness. He's not positioning himself above the audience. He's diving into the mess and inviting you to watch. And the thing about that kind of comedy, the self-owning kind, the vulnerable kind, is that it creates a genuinely unpredictable experience. You don't know where the story's going. You don't know what he's going to admit. You don't know what level of personal catastrophe is about to be revealed for your entertainment. And that uncertainty is comedy gold. Now let's talk about what a significant portion of the Rogan sphere has been doing with their stage time over the last several years. Pronouns of trans people, woke college kids. The idea that you can't say anything anymore, delivered with full seriousness to a sold-out arena full of people who are definitely hearing it. Cancel culture. Safe spaces. These kids today. The bit where the comedian sighs heavily and says, I just think comedy used to be, and then describes a time when you could apparently punch down freely, and everyone applauded. Now look, I'm not here to debate anyone's politics. What I am here to do is apply the basic logic of comedy to these bits, and ask one question.
And in that special is my favorite Michael Jackson bit and my favorite bit about the Iraq War, where he's just like, what does the Iraq Army's uniform look like? I'll wait, tell me. He's like, and then he's talking about how insurgents, he's like, we're killing motherfuckers in flip-flops, sweatpants. It was just, I mean, it's a bit in between two bits.
Yeah.
Like it's almost an aside, and it is literally as good as any political comic because he just gets to the fucking heart of the matter. That special's fucking unbelievable.
Yeah, he had a run.
Who is this punching? Because there's a concept in comedy, and it's not complicated, where the direction of a joke matters.
You know, insane. I do think somebody was being mean to you, but what happened? Do you want to talk about the betrayal that caused you to just had to move on, really? Okay, sick. Something horrific happened that you don't want to talk about, and that's okay. We'll move on. It's okay. Yeah. You're positive. I'm not going to dig any deeper than I have because I feel like you're barely hanging on as it is.
When you punch up at power, or when you punch at yourself, you're doing something surprising. You're taking a risk. The audience feels like they're in on something with you. When you spend 10 minutes punching down at people who have very little cultural or institutional power, something different happens. It doesn't feel brave. It doesn't feel dangerous. It feels like yelling at someone who can't yell back and calling that courage. And maybe more importantly, from a pure comedy standpoint, it gets old. The attack helicopter joke was edgy in 2014. In 2026, it is a fossil. It is a comedy artifact preserved in amber. And yet, if you went to a certain kind of comedy club tonight in a certain city in Texas, there is a non-zero chance you would hear a version of it delivered with the confidence of a man premiering original material. Stavros' material, by contrast, doesn't age the same way, because personal stories, specific, human, embarrassing personal stories, don't become dated the way cultural punching bags do. His stories are his. They couldn't be anyone else's. And that specificity is what separates real comedy from what increasingly feels like the Rogan orbit's habit of recycling the same Facebook meme from 2011, putting a tuxedo on it and calling it a Netflix special. Here's what's wild about all of this. Stavros doesn't need to go on a podcast and say the culture war bits are lazy. He doesn't need to write an op-ed about the comedic ethics of punching down. He can just go on stage and be genuinely, specifically, personally funny.
All right, I'm gonna say the words, don't laugh at the wrong places. I could tell, no, it's not gonna work.
And that alone functions as a rebuttal. His success is the argument. His sold-out shows are the counterpoint. Every time a Stavros bit lands because it's new and specific and weird and human, it quietly asks, why would you watch someone do that pronoun bit for the 100th time when this exists? That's not a call-out. It's worse. It's a shrug. Okay, let's talk about the cult thing. Because I know cult is a strong word, and I want to be precise about what I mean.
Why do you think you're ready to transcend?
I mean, because it sounds sick, honestly. Getting slurped up. God's watching. Me and you forever.
Forever.
I don't think Joe Rogan is sitting in a compound somewhere writing doctrine. I don't think his comedian friends are wearing matching outfits. This isn't that kind of cult. It's more like a vibe cult. And vibe cults are, in many ways, more interesting. Here's how they work. You have a central figure, someone with enormous reach and credibility within a specific community. That figure expresses opinions. Not as opinions, though, as discoveries. As things that just make sense if you think about them. Here's what I think is going on with add topic. Have you noticed that? Add observation. People don't talk about this, but add thing that many people actually do talk about. The audience receives these observations. They discuss them. They repeat them. And gradually, the central figure's attitude, his way of looking at the world, becomes a kind of very shared operating system for his followers. Then the orbit forms. Other comedians, podcasters, and commentators who share that attitude start gravitating toward the central figure. They appear on his show. He appears on theirs. They perform at the same clubs. They promote each other's specials. They speak the same language, share the same grievances, adopt the same posture of beleaguered truth-tellers in a world that would prefer they stayed quiet. And now you have a scene, and the scene has all the hallmarks of a cult. There's a hierarchy. Appearing on Rogan's show is within this world a legitimizing event. It's the comedy equivalent of getting a papal audience. Comics talk about it. Fans track it. New comics aspire to it. The stamp of Rogan approval has become a kind of canonization. There's a doctrine, anti-woke, anti-political correctness. Just asking questions about whatever topic is being discussed. A consistent posture of skepticism toward institutions paired with complete trust in whichever podcaster is speaking at the moment. There's ritual, the long-form conversation, the multi-hour episode, the clips that get shared as revelation, the listeners who bring Rogan talking points into conversations about health, politics, science, and culture as if they are facts that have been verified by someone with expertise. And there are heretics, comics who don't fit the vibe, comedians who get labeled too political, by which the scene usually means political in the wrong direction, performers who get quietly excluded from the orbit, not through any explicit ban, but through the natural gravitational pull of a scene that only promotes its own. Now, here is where Stavros Halkias becomes interesting in this context. Stavros doesn't have a doctrine for you to adopt. His fan base is not organized around a shared worldview. They are organized around a shared experience, watching a funny man embarrass himself for their entertainment. That's it. There's no posture you have to strike to be a Stavros fan. There are no talking points to memorize. There's no correct attitude about society you need to perform to prove you're in the tribe. You just have to think it's funny when he tells the story. And it is funny, so you're in. That's a fundamentally different relationship between a comedian and an audience. And Stavros himself, again, not in a rant, not in some declaration, has made it pretty clear that he doesn't want the other thing. He has talked about not wanting to be treated as a political figure.
Police asked for any information regarding the red-haired man in the center.
Why aren't you dead?
I did die, Chip. I was sent back to get you.
You couldn't transcend without me. We need each other.
What's up?
About not wanting his comedy to get tied to an ideology. About how his job is to write jokes, not to tell people how to think. And in the context of what we've just described, a scene where comedians absolutely do want to be treated as political figures and absolutely do tie their comedy to an ideology.
I just don't want to do anything because it's the right career move or it'll get me more famous or it'll get me anything like that. I just want to do stuff to be funny, you know? And if you think I'm funny, you don't think I'm funny, that's totally fine. If you don't think I'm funny, but like my goals are artistic, as dumb as it sounds, where it's like my act is fucking stupid.
That's a pretty clear signal about what he thinks of that whole project. He's not naming names. He doesn't have to. The contrast is loud enough. Let's bring this together. Because I think there's a version of this conversation where someone says, look, Rogan built a massive empire. He got a $100 million Spotify deal. His comics have Netflix specials. His audience is enormous. How is that a failure? And that's a fair challenge. So let me be precise. I'm not saying Rogan failed. I'm saying something shifted. At some point in the Rogan ecosystem, the comedy became secondary to the brand. The jokes became less important than the attitude, and the audience started coming less to laugh and more to feel confirmed, to have their sense of how the world works validated by a famous person who shares it. That's not a comedy audience anymore. That's a congregation. Stavros Halkias, meanwhile, built something much simpler and, I'd argue, much more durable. He became someone people genuinely find funny. Not inspiring, not validating, not enlightening. Funny. The original pitch, the thing comedy was invented to do. And he did it by being willing to be the butt of his own joke, by being specific instead of broad, by making you feel like you're watching a real person do a real thing rather than a brand delivering content to its audience. Here's the thing about comedy that requires a cult to sustain it. It tends to fade when the cult gets tired. The culture war material that powered a lot of the Rogan sphere in mid to late 2010 is running into a wall. The targets are getting old. The audience that was shocked into laughter by "you can't say anything anymore" in 2015 has heard it enough times now that the shock is gone. What's left? Stavros doesn't have that problem, because this embarrassing thing happened to me and I'm going to tell you about it. It's not a trend. It's not a political moment. It's not a cultural flashpoint that can pass. It is the most enduring structure in the history of comedy. A human being in front of other human beings saying, "Here is how ridiculous it is to be me." That doesn't get old, and that's why, as the Rogan orbit continues to calcify into something that looks more like a political identity than a comedy scene, Stavros keeps growing. He's not growing because he's aligned with the right side of a culture war. He's growing because he's funny, and it turns out, in a fairly savage irony, that being funny is still the best strategy for a comedian. Rogan built a comedy cult. Stavros built comedy. One needs doctrine and mutual promotion and 3-hour episodes and the implicit promise of enlightenment to keep the machine running. The other one just needs a microphone, a good story, and 10 minutes of your time. Guess which model is more sustainable? Look, I'm not saying Stavros Halkias is perfect. I'm not saying Rogan has never made anyone laugh or that everyone in his orbit is phoning it in. What I'm saying is that when you put these two approaches side by side, the comedian as human clown versus the comedian as philosopher king, one of them is doing something ancient and honest and reliably funny. And one of them has turned into something that requires a lot more infrastructure than a punchline. Stavros didn't call out Joe Rogan's comedy cult with a rant. He called it out by doing the thing the cult forgot was the point, being funny. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Rogan's orbit has gotten too cult-like? Do you think Halkias is as good as people say, or overrated? Is the whole anti-Rogan framing even fair? Drop it in the comments. I read everything. If this video made you think, or at least made you slightly more likely to look up a Stavros clip, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe if you want more of this. There's a lot more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one.